During a family vacation, my parents told me to sleep on the couch so my brother and his new girlfriend could have my room. I quietly got up, booked a suite next door, and told the hotel to block their access to my card. When they tried to charge room service to me, I watched from the pool. Their meltdown was glorious. I have always known my place in my family. Not the favorite, not the golden child, not the one they went out of their way for. My younger brother, Sean, got that role. I was the afterthought, the extra, the one expected to compromise for the sake of keeping the peace. I never made a fuss about it growing up. I learned early that protesting did nothing. If Sean needed something, he got it. If I needed something, I was being difficult. If I expressed disappointment, I was being dramatic. So, I learned to stop expecting things. By the time I was in my 30s, I had built a life for myself far away from my family. I had a good job in marketing, lived comfortably in my own apartment, and had close friends who treated me better than my own blood ever did. I visited my parents out of obligation, nothing more. They weren't cruel, not outright, but the difference in how they treated Sean versus me was like night and day. It was just something I accepted, or at least, I thought I had. Then came the trip. My dad was turning 60, and my parents decided we should all take a family vacation to celebrate. A week in Miami at a beautiful hotel by the beach, their treat. At first I hesitated. I could already picture it me, stuck watching from the sidelines, as my parents fawned over Sean, catering to his every whim while I was left to entertain myself. But then I figured, why not? I could use some sun and relaxation. If nothing else, I'd have a nice hotel room, and some time to myself. I should have known better. The moment I arrived at the hotel, I spotted Sean standing near the check-in desk. He wasn't alone. A tall, blonde woman was at his side, holding his arm. "This is Jessica," he said when I walked up to greet them. "She's staying with us." I nodded, already sensing where this was going. Sean had a new girlfriend every few months. They rarely lasted long, and my parents treated each one like a princess while she was in the picture. They doted on these women, more in a week than they had on me in my entire life. I should have braced myself for what came next. That evening, we sat down for dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was a fancy place, all white tablecloths and candlelight, the kind of setting where you had to pretend to be enjoying yourself even when you weren't. My parents were in good spirits, probably because they had Sean right where they wanted him at their table, soaking up all their attention. Halfway through the meal, my mother turned to me with the same tone she always used when she was about to ask me for something she already expected me to agree to. "Honey, we were thinking it'd be nice for Sean and Jessica to have a little privacy," she said casually. I knew what was coming before she even said it. "So they'll take your room, and you can sleep on the couch in the suite." I put my fork down slowly. "You want me to give up the room I booked and paid for?" My mom gave a tight smile, the kind that was supposed to pass for patience but just looked like mild irritation. "Well, it's all in the family, right?" she said. "It's just for a few nights." I glanced at my dad. He wasn't even paying attention, scrolling through his phone like this had nothing to do with him. Of course, looked completely unbothered. He didn't even glance my way. And Jessica, well, she just kept her eyes on her plate. Clearly uncomfortable but not enough to say anything. This was normal to them, expected. They assumed I would do it. No hesitation, no complaint. I felt something in me harden. A quiet anger, slow but sure. For once, I wasn't going to let them walk over me. I forced a small smile. "Right," I said. "Not a big deal." And that was the last thing I said to them before I got up and left the table. I packed my bags that night, not because I was giving up my room, but because I was leaving the damn hotel altogether. I walked straight to the front desk and booked a suite at the 5-star hotel right next door. A much nicer one. Then, before I left, I turned back to the receptionist and said, "One more thing, can you make sure no one in my family can charge anything to my card?" She gave me a knowing look. "Of course, ma'am." It was. That night, I slept in a massive, luxurious bed, with soft sheets, uninterrupted by anyone else's nonsense. The next morning, I had breakfast by the pool, sipping freshly squeezed orange juice while the sun warmed my skin. I let myself enjoy it, because for the first time in a long time, I had put myself first. And then right on cue, I got the text. "Mom, why is your card declining?" I let the message sit for a few minutes before replying. "Oh, I'm not staying there anymore. You should ask Sean." I pictured the exact moment she read that text. The confusion, the slow realization, the absolute outrage. My phone buzzed again. "Mom, what? Where are you?" I left her on red. From my lounge chair, I watched the meltdown unfold. My mother, furious at the front desk arguing with the receptionist. Sean, confused, looking around like he was expecting me to magically fix the problem. Jessica, shifting uncomfortably on her feet, clearly regretting every decision that had led her to this moment. Then, the final cherry on top, Sean walked up to the poolside bar, ordered drinks, and tried to charge them to my card. The bartender shook his head and gestured toward the front desk. Sean frowned, said something. The bartender pointed again. Sean's frown deepened. And then, realization. I almost laughed out loud. Sean turned toward our mother, his expression darkening. She was already pulling out her own wallet, looking furious as she handed over her card to pay for his room. For the first time ever, my mom was paying for Sean's mess. And me, I was sipping my mimosa, basking in the absolute petty glory of it all. When I finally responded to my mom's frantic calls, I I didn't bother explaining myself. I paid for my room, I told her, my voice calm. If Sean needed one, that's on you. She sputtered, ranted, called me selfish, told me I was overreacting. I just smiled. Hope you enjoy your stay, I said, and then I hung up. By the time I flew home, I knew things would never be the same between us. And honestly, I was okay with that. For once, I had put myself first, and damn, it felt good. For the rest of my vacation, I ignored their calls and texts. If they wanted to be mad, that was their problem. I spent my days lounging by the pool, treating myself to spa treatments, and eating at restaurants I knew my parents would consider too extravagant. It was the kind of vacation I had always dreamed of, the kind where I didn't have to compromise, or put up with passive-aggressive comments, or be made to feel like an outsider in my own family. But I knew it couldn't last forever. By the time I was packing my bags to leave, the reality of what I'd done started to sink in. I hadn't just walked away from an unfair situation, I had actively defied my family in a way I never had before. My mother especially wasn't going to let it go, and I was right. The first thing I noticed when I landed back home was the silence. Normally, after a family trip, my mother would send a long text with reminders about upcoming birthdays or family events I was expected to attend. But this time, nothing. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had finally realized how they treated me. That hope lasted less than 24 hours. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Sean, nice move. Real mature. I rolled my eyes. Of course, he was the first to reach out, not to apologize, not to acknowledge that what they did was wrong, just to let me know he was mad. I ignored him. Then, a few hours later, another message. This time from my mom. Mom, I hope you're happy. Your little stunt ruined the entire trip. Your father is furious and I can't believe you do something like this to your own family. Do something like what? Stand up for myself? Refuse to be treated like a second-class guest at a vacation I was paying for? I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have a response, but because I knew nothing I said would change anything. A few days passed. Then a week. I went back to work, went out with friends, carried on with my life. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Something bigger than just a few angry text messages. And then, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, she called again. And again. Finally, I sighed and picked up. Hello? Are you proud of yourself? She demanded, skipping over any greeting. Do you know how much you embarrassed us? I leaned back in my chair. You mean how I embarrassed you by refusing to give up my room? Or how I embarrassed you by making you actually pay for Sean for once? Don't be smart with me, she snapped. You abandoned your family, you disappeared without a word, made a scene, and left us scrambling. You mean you left yourself scrambling because you assumed I'd just roll over and take it? Again, don't talk to me like that, she snapped. We invited you on that trip to spend time together and you told me to sleep on the couch so Sean could have my room. I finished for her. Yeah, I remember. There was silence. A sharp, angry silence. Then, finally, she said, you were always difficult, always selfish. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. There it was. The truth. Not an apology, not a moment of realization, just blame. You know what, Mom? I said, my voice calmer than I felt. I think this conversation is over. And before she could get another word in, I hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had drawn my boundary, and now I could move on. I was wrong. A week later, I came home from work and found a package on my doorstep. No return address, just my name, written in my mother's neat, controlled handwriting. I brought it inside and opened it cautiously. Inside was a photo album. At first, I didn't understand. The cover was one I recognized. An old family album from when Sean and I were kids. I flipped it open, skimming the pages. Our childhood birthdays, holidays, vacation. Then halfway through, I noticed something. Every single picture of me was gone. Cut out, my stomach turned as I flipped through the pages faster. Picture after picture, event after event, anywhere I had been. There was just an empty space where my face should have been. At the very end of the album, a single note was taped to the last page. In my mother's handwriting, it read, if you don't want to be part of this family, we won't force you to be. I stared at the words for a long time, my hands trembling slightly. Not anger, not sadness, just confirmation. This was never about me walking away. This was about them punishing me for refusing to be their doormat. And then, just as I was processing that, my phone buzzed. A new text from Sean. Sean, enjoy being an only child. I let out a breath. Slow. Steady. Then, without another thought, I took the album, walked outside, and dropped it into the trash. They wanted to erase me? Fine. I would show them how easy it was to live without them. For the next few weeks, I waited. Not for an apology. I knew better than that. But for the next move. Because if there was one thing I had learned about my family, it was that they never let things go. And I was right. It started small. Passive-aggressive messages from my mom. Always just vague enough to make it seem like she was checking in, but with an undertone of guilt-tripping. Mom. Haven't heard from you. Hope you're happy with your choices. Mom. Your father's blood pressure has been high lately. Stress does that. You know. Mom. Your grandmother asked about you. I didn't know what to tell her. I ignored them. Then Sean got involved. Unlike my mother, who preferred the slow burn of emotional manipulation, Sean went straight for the jugular. One evening, as I was leaving work, my phone buzzed with a notification, a tagged post on Facebook. I clicked it. It was a photo of my family at dinner. My parents, Sean, Jessica, a few aunts and uncles. The caption, "Family is everything." Some people will never understand that. The likes and comments poured in. Relatives, family friends, even old acquaintances chiming in with their approval. So true. Family comes first. What a beautiful family. Some people don't know how lucky they are. I knew that post was meant for me. And yet, for some reason, I didn't feel the way they probably wanted me to feel. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Because if this was what family meant to them, manipulation, punishment, rewriting history to make themselves look like the victims, then maybe I really didn't belong there. And maybe I never had. Then came the final straw. A month after the trip, I was at home, curled up on my couch with a glass of wine, when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? A pause. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Hey, my father said. I was so startled I almost dropped my wine glass. Of all the people in my family, he was the last person I expected to reach out. My father never called me. Not on my birthday, not on holidays. Anytime we spoke, it was because my mother handed him the phone and forced him to. So why now? Dad, I said cautiously. A heavy sigh. Look, I don't want to get involved in this mess between you and your mother. Then why are you calling me? I wanted to ask, but I held my tongue. He continued, his voice gruff. She's upset. Your brother's upset. I just think maybe it's time to let this go. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not an apology, not a moment of accountability, just another let's sweep this under the rug attempt. I had been here before, so many times before, and I knew exactly how this conversation would go if I let it. First, he'd try to neutralize the situation, act like I was being dramatic for holding on to something so small. Then he'd suggest I just apologize, because that was always the easiest way to fix things. And finally, if I refused, he'd say something like, well, if you're going to be difficult, don't blame us when we stop trying. I took a deep breath. Dad, I said evenly, what exactly do you think I did wrong? Silence. Then a small sigh. Look, I don't want to argue. Of course you don't. Because that would require acknowledging the truth. I pressed on. Did I do something wrong? Or are you just saying that because Mom's upset I didn't let her walk all over me this time? Another pause. Then a deflection. This family has been through a lot, he muttered. We don't need more division. I almost laughed. We don't need more division. As if they weren't the ones who had cut me out of a damn photo album. As if they weren't the ones who had treated me like I was disposable. My entire life. As if this whole situation wasn't just a result of me finally refusing to take their crap. I wasn't doing this anymore. You know what, Dad? I said, voice steady. You can tell Mom and Sean I'm not interested in pretending things are fine just so they can feel better. A long silence. Then a clipped, fine, and the line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. My heart beat slow and steady. There it was. The moment I had always feared. The moment where they finally gave up on me. And yet, for some reason, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like relief. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to fix things. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't worried about their opinions. I wasn't part of their game anymore. And while they were still fuming over my so-called betrayal, I was busy moving on. Months passed. My life got better. Without the constant weight of my family's expectations, I threw myself into my work. I started going to new places, making new friends, and enjoying my own company. I no longer had to check my phone every day, dreading the latest guilt trip. Then, just as I had fully settled into my new reality, the next inevitable thing happened. A wedding invitation. Sean and Jessica. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Why would they invite me? After everything, I was sure they wanted nothing to do with me. But then I thought about it. This wasn't an olive branch. This wasn't a gesture of reconciliation. This was about control. They didn't want me there because they missed me. They wanted me there to prove a point, to show me that I was replaceable, to make it clear that the family had moved on, just fine, without me. And the fact that they went out of their way to send me an invitation meant that, despite all their efforts to erase me, they still wanted a reaction. So, I gave them one. I RSVP'd, yes. I arrived fashionably late. I walked in just as guests were being seated for the reception. Heads turned. People whispered. I could feel the weight of my family's eyes on me, but I didn't so much as blink. I looked good. I had chosen my outfit carefully. Elegant, but effortless. The kind that made it impossible to look away. I wore confidence like armor, walking through that venue as if I belonged there. Because whether they liked it or not, I did. Sean spotted me first. He was standing near the bar, a drink in hand, laughing at something a cousin had said. But the second he saw me, the laughter died. Jessica, now his wife, followed his gaze. Her expression was unreadable. Then, my mother. She had been speaking with a group of relatives, probably basking in the glow of Sean's big day. But when she turned and locked eyes with me, her entire face stiffened. It was the same look she used to give me when I did something that embarrassed her, when I wasn't being the good daughter she could parade around. She had expected me to stay away. I did instead. I smiled, grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter, and raised it slightly in her direction. Then I walked away. I made sure to chat with distant relatives, old family friends, people who hadn't been part of the drama, but still had enough curiosity to ask, "So how have you been?" I gave them just enough to make them interested. "I've been great. Work is going amazing. I just got a promotion. Oh yes, I just got back from a vacation in Greece. It was stunning. Dating? Not really. But I'm not in a rush. I've been having too much fun to settle down just yet." Every casual mention of my success, happiness, and independence was like a slow, twisting K&F, and I knew my mother was hearing every word. But the real highlight of the night? When it was time for the speeches, my father stood up to give the typical father of the groom speech. It was exactly what you'd expect, praising Sean, toasting to his future, reminiscing about how he was always such a wonderful son. Then, almost as if he had forgotten I was there, he made a mistake. "Family is everything," he said, looking straight at my mother. "And no matter what, we always stick together." It was so blatant, so obvious, and it might have worked if anyone else had said it. But here's the thing. My father wasn't a man of many words. He didn't speak on emotions. He didn't involve himself in family drama. So the fact that he had suddenly decided to make a public statement about family being so important, it reeked of my mother's influence. And people noticed. I could see it in the way some relatives exchanged looks, the slight shift in energy. I wasn't the only one who saw through the act. And that's when I realized something. I didn't need to get revenge. They were doing it to themselves. By trying so hard to make a statement, they were showing everyone exactly how insecure they were. They thought they had erased me, but all they had done was make my absence louder. And when I stood up, excused myself, and left the wedding early, without a word, without a fight, without giving them the reaction they wanted, it was over. Because I could tell in that moment that they knew. They hadn't won. They had lost. That was the last time I saw them. After that night, I stopped responding to my mother's messages. I didn't block her, I didn't need to, because after a while she just stopped trying. Sean never reached out again. Jessica? I found out later that she left him after just a year of marriage. And my father, he stayed exactly the same, silent, uninvolved. Just like always, I moved on, not with anger, not with resentment, just with the knowledge that I had done something they never expected. I had walked away, on my own terms, and in the end, that was the only revenge I ever needed.